All right, hello there, finance friends. Um, in this video, we're going to talk about interest rates and the time value of money. That's our topic today. Interest rates and the time value of money. I said last time we met that to be good at personal finance, you need to have knowledge and act on it and think of systems. There's a handful of really fundamental tools, though, analytical tools, tools that just form a bench line, a baseline, a benchmark, a bare minimum of financial knowledge. And one of those tools, a critical idea, is called the time value of money, which we can abbreviate to TVM. So today, let's talk about this. We're going to start with a discussion of interest rates, then move into simple and compound interest, and then we'll talk about the time value of money, and I'll show you one of the really important tools that you can learn to master in your journey of personal finance, a financial calculator. And that'll allow you to do a lot of calculations and really open up your mind to how money grows over time and how you can think long term, reach your goals, things like that. Okay, so let's talk about it. I want to start by talking about interest rates. So the first question is, what is an interest rate? And the answer is, it's pretty straightforward, um, fairly simple, but it gets confusing. Let's think about interest rates as the price of money. That's what it is. An interest rate is the price of money. So interest rates are the price of money. When you borrow money, you have to pay interest for the privilege of borrowing it. So the money that you pay, the interest that you pay when you borrow money, that's the price that you have to pay for the privilege of borrowing. Turn that around. If you lend money out, or if you're a saver or an investor, interest is the price of money. But in the case where you're the investor, where you're the one who owns the money and you're deploying it, by lending it out or by buying assets or by putting it in the bank, you're collecting the interest. So, really important idea, interest is the price of money. And interest applies to both lenders and borrowers. So, this idea of interest applies to both lenders, people who have extra cash and deploy it, and borrowers, people who don't. And in fact, I think it's important here, we should really point out that lenders have excess cash. In order to be a lender, you have to have excess cash and you deploy that. That's saving, that's investing. Okay. Think about the systems. Now we're hoping to layer on there. Okay, I'm going to make money, I'm going to spend money. I want to have extra cash available to then deploy. Lenders have excess cash. Borrowers don't have enough cash. And if you think about it, what a thing like a bank or a stock market, any kind of financial intermediary, we call them, what those institutions do is they bring borrowers and savers together. They bring people who need cash together with people who have extra cash. The price of that cash is the interest rate. Okay, it's important to know that it applies to both lenders and borrowers. So one of the big kind of takeaways of this lecture, there will always be interest at play. Lenders, investors, savers collect it. Borrowers pay it. And this is going to put a big question on you that you're going to think about a lot. Do you want to be a capitalist or a consumer? A borrower or a lender? Do you want to pay interest or earn interest? And that's a really big choice to make. Okay, so interest is just the price of money. Um, Interest refers to both the interest rate. So we have what's called the interest rate, which is also known as the APR, the annual percentage rate. This is always expressed as a percentage, and it reflects how much interest you have to pay. And the formula for interest is pretty simple. So the formula for interest is I equals P times R times T, where I is the interest in terms of dollars that you have to pay or that you're going to earn. It's the interest in dollars that's equal to the principal, which is the amount of money we're talking about, the amount of money that you put in the bank, the size of the loan that you borrow. The principal times the interest rate times the time period. In finance, we almost always default to a time period of 1 year. So we usually default that the T is going to be 1. If we have to adjust it, we can adjust it later. Notice that the interest rate, this is expressed as a percentage, and the principal is the amount that was either loaned out or invested or borrowed. That's the amount of money at play. That's in a dollar sign. So interest is just the principal times the rate times the time. Okay, it's a pretty straightforward idea. We could do a couple of simple examples. Let's talk about this from the lens of a borrower. So let's say that you decide to go on a vacation and your vacation cost you $7,000. You don't have the cash for that. You didn't save for it. So you paid for it on a credit card. So you paid for your vacation on a credit card. And let's just say, to make the math easy, that your credit card has a 24% APR. APR stands for annual percentage rate. APR is annual percentage rate. It's the price of interest over the course of a year. So again, the default with interest is a year. APR is annual percentage rate. Okay. So you spend $7,000, you put on a credit card, and your credit card charges you 24% interest because you borrowed the money from the credit card company. How much money will you have to pay in interest on this? Well, we can look at it two ways. We're saying for the month. How much money will you have to pay in interest this month? There's two ways to solve it. You could say that I equals PRT, so it's going to be the $7,000 that you borrowed times 24%, which is 0.24, times 1. And that's going to equal 1680. $1,680. It's a lot of money. It's a big price to pay for that vacation. Okay. There's a second way you can do it. Actually, sorry, I didn't complete this. We were talking about monthly. So if it's 1680, sorry about that. If it's 1680 in interest for the whole year, okay, let's make sure we get that clear. I made a mistake. $7,000 times 24% times 1 year, that's 1680 for the year. If you divide that 1680 by 12, then the monthly interest is 140. Sorry about that. I had to make that clear. There's a second way you can get this as well. I is equal to P times R times T. Well, if we set this for monthly, your annual percentage rate is 24%. A stands for annual. There's 12 months in a year. So if you're paying 24% annually, 24 divided by 12 means you're paying 2% interest monthly. In which case you would plug in the $7,000 times the 2%, which is 0.02, which again is $140. Okay. So you're going to have to pay $140 every month in interest until you pay this thing off. Okay. This interest will keep accumulating and accumulating until you pay off the principal. Because again, let's look at the formula. It's right here. I equals PRT. So as long as you have a principal, as long as you have a debt, as long as you owe money, you're going to be paying interest on it. And that can extend for a real long time and really, really crush you. Okay, let's take a quick pause. Let's jump into systems theory. Why would that interest hurt you? Well, let's think about this. We talked before about the bucket, and the bucket is your savings and your checking account balance. You have income coming into the bucket, and that's going to raise your bucket level. Well, we talked about holes and outflows, and one big outflow, one big hole that you have in your bucket right now is interest payments. So now we can start saying, I'm starting to see from a systems lens why debt is probably not so good, because debt implies interest, and interest is an outflow. It's money leaving my bucket, and my stock, my account balance is going to fall. Okay. Another way to think about this from a systems lens, we learned before that you're going to have, let's say that you have, we're just going to say a job and another source of income, and that's going to be your total income. Well, with your total income, you can spend that in three main ways: on obligations, which include the interest on your debt; on luxuries, entertainment, eating out, nice things like that; and on savings and investing. Well, hopefully you can see that if you have a lot of interest, if you have to pay a lot of debt, you're going to be spending a lot more of your income on obligations. And if you're not careful, that can starve out, suffocate, eliminate the money that you have to invest. If you get to a point where you have excessive debt and high interest payments, you might not have any more money left over to invest. And that's a big, big problem, because if you don't have the money to invest, then you're never going to get that feedback loop that we've talked about and build that wealth generating machine. So anyway, systems. Let's pull it back now, back to interest. This was a case when the interest worked against you. In other words, you were paying it out. But let's turn it around and let's say that now you're a capitalist, not a consumer. So let's say that we start over and you still have that $7,000, but instead of spending it on a vacation, or instead of having to borrow $7,000, you have $7,000 and you deposit it into the bank. You deposit it into an account, and that account earns 8% interest annually. So now you're going to get rewarded. You say, I'm going to earn interest. How much interest will you earn? Well, we can do it like we did. I equals P times R times T. So it's going to be the $7,000 that you put in the bank multiplied by the 8%, and it's over 1 year. So you're going to make $560 of interest. It's not too bad, not too shabby at all. Not too bad at all. What we just did right here with this formula, I equals PRT, we just calculated what we call simple interest. This calculation here that we did was called simple interest. Simple interest is just like it sounds. It's the interest that you earn, and it's I equals PRT. Okay? That's simple interest. Very straightforward. And it's good to earn it. But there's something in personal finance that's even more important, an even bigger part of our wealth generating system, an even bigger part of our architecture of feedback loops. Okay. And I want to introduce to you an idea called compound interest. So we have simple interest and we also have compound interest. And compound interest is a really, really important part of personal finance. So let's talk a little bit about it. And let's keep our same example. Let's say that you still put $7,000 in the bank, you're earning 8%. So let's think about this. Let's put year and let's put balance. We're going to make a little column here and let's put interest at 8%. And then let's put ending balance. And let's see what happens with compound interest. So we just put in year one, do the same thing. We put our $7,000 in the bank. We earned our interest, I equals PRT. So we earned $560 of interest. And at the end of the year, we have our original 7,000 that we started with, plus the 560 that we got in interest. And if we add those together, we end the year with $7,560. Now you think, Eric, that's nothing new. We did this already with simple interest. Well, there's one little thing. Simple interest sort of assumes that when you got the interest, you just took it out. You know, you made the 560, you took the money out, you got the interest, you spent it, you did whatever. Look at compound interest. This 7,560 becomes the starting balance for year two. So now we're not starting with 7, we're starting with 7,560. And now we grow 8% on that amount, and our interest is 604.80. Ah, interesting. And now we started with 75.60 and we earn 604.80. So we end with 81.64.80. And carrying it forward, this ending balance at the end of year two becomes our starting balance at the end of year three, 8164.80. And I think you see where this is going. We're still earning 8%. That's our interest rate. We're still earning 8%, but we're no longer earning interest only on the $7,000 that we started with. We're earning it on that plus all of the other interest. Now we're at 8164.80. The interest here is going to be 653.18. And at the end of the year, we would have 8817.98. And if we were to keep going, we would see that in year four, we would actually end with 952.342. And at year five, we would end with 10.285.29. Amazing. We're earning way more interest than we thought. Because here's the key, my friends. Ultimately, simple interest is interest on the principal. It's the interest you earn on the initial amount that you put in. So back up here, we had $7,000, we earned 560. We had $7,000, we earned 560. Compound interest is so powerful because compound interest is interest on the interest. When you earn compound interest, You're not just getting interest on the original principal, you're getting interest on all of the other interest. And I think that maybe you can put this in a systems lens. We had principal. This was our balance. We earned interest. With compound interest, we take that interest and it increases our principal. So now we get even more interest and our principal gets bigger. And we get even more interest and our principal gets bigger. And with each and every time period, more interest grows. So the principal gets bigger. So even more interest grows. We can see that in this little map, our arrow gets fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter and fatter because we're getting more and more and more and more interest. So that, my friends, is compound interest and simple interest. I want to conclude this video and then we'll shoot a separate one for time value principles with this idea. Golden rule of economics and personal finance. Every now and then we have these golden rules. Golden rule number one, compounding is powerful. It's really hard to believe how much money you can make on compounding. But because interest on interest is so powerful, and because of those feedback loops that tell us how the system operates are so powerful, compounding is very powerful. The second golden rule when it comes to interest and compounding, time is your friend. We're now introducing an element into our system, time. We've talked about feedback loops. Time adds to that because the more time you have to grow your wealth building system, the more time you have to get more and more feedback loops, the more time you have to make these arrows even fatter and fatter and really grow your wealth. So we're introducing the power of time. And time is a critical factor. Critical factor. This leads to another big golden rule. Control what you can control. In personal finance, a lot of the things that are going to affect you are out of your control. You will not be able to influence them. You cannot influence the stock market. You cannot influence the bank's interest rates. So you have to find those opportunities to control what you can control. And one big thing that you can control is when you start. The earlier you start, the more time you have to grow that wealth system, the more those feedback loops work in your favor, the richer you're going to become. So when it comes to your investing life, you're going to start early. You're going to save early. And the final part, the final golden rule, debt works for you. Sorry, I'll take that back. We don't want to say debt. Let me start over. The fourth rule will say interest can work for you or against you. In other words, we said earlier, interest is the price of money, whether you pay it or receive it, whether you're a borrower or a lender, a saver or a spender. Okay? Interest can work for you or against you. And this, therefore, leads not to so much of a golden rule, but a key decision. In any system, there's golden guiding principles. leverage points, we can call them, and key decisions that you're going to have to make. And here's the key decision here. Are you going to be a capitalist or a consumer? Pick one. You can live below your means, save extra money, deploy it toward investing, and get that feedback loop working in your favor. Or you can be a consumer, living in debt, paying interest, and having that vicious debt feedback loop crush you. So, this is time. This is interest. And this is a big fundamental part of thinking like a personal, financially savvy person. Okay? It's a part of being financially literate. In our next video, we're going to take these concepts and extend them a little bit to an idea called the time value of money. And I'll show you how to use a calculator online to make some good predictions and to do some good planning. Okay? Thanks for your time. See you soon.